We had a very odd case where a guy was accused of, beating up his girlfriend or wife. I can't remember. This is like 25 years ago almost. And, we were at the bond hearing. We get him off. He comes back on the street again. And he ended up arguing with his wife and took an axe and cut off her arm. And I'm like, geez, this is not what I want to get involved in.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of the various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Sagi Shaked, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Sheked Law. Sagi, how you doing, man?
I'm doing amazing, Justin. How are you?
I am doing great. Well, before we begin, let's take a jump over here and take a look at Sagi's website. It is Sheked Law. That's ShakedLaw.com. We'll have a link, as always, down below in the description. You can also call him. The number on the website, at least, is 305-937-0191. There may be other numbers as well, and you're welcome to supply those. But we'll put that on there. You guys can see it as well. Sheked Law is a personal injury law firm based out of Miami. And we're going to be getting to know a lot about Sheked today, or Saghi today, and his law firm and what he does. So we'll save that to dive in, but we will be getting into that very quickly. He has over, if I saw correctly, I think he has 100 reviews on YouTube on Google with a 4.9 rating. So clearly a leader in the field, knows what he's talking about, and I'm really excited to kind of dive in and see what's going on. Before we do that, though, we are going to jump over and read from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Habanero Social. This episode is brought to you by Habanero Social, the AI-powered platform that takes the headache out of managing your Google business profile. You can automate content creation, manage reviews, and optimize your local SEO without lifting a finger. Whether you're looking to boost foot traffic, improve your customer engagement, or simply have more time, Habanero Social does it all seamlessly. Visit habanerosocial.com today. Let the AI do the heavy lifting for you so that you can focus on what matters the most, which is, of course, growing your business. Our second sponsor is andropology.com. Gentlemen, if you are looking to take charge of your health and feel your best, listen up. Whether it's managing type 2 diabetes, boosting your testosterone later in life, or just wanting to increase your overall longevity, andropology.com has got you covered. They dive deep into natural solutions from superfoods like spirulina and tart cherry to various targeted exercise routines like HIIT, which is high intensity interval training that can help you reclaim your energy and vitality. At andropology.com, it's all about practical science-backed advice tailored specifically for men who want to improve their health without the fluff. Think of it as your go-to guide for navigating the complexities of men's health, simplified. From diet tips to supplement recommendations, they have everything you need to get started. Visit andropology.com today to explore the latest insights on living a healthier, more vibrant life. That's andropology.com, where better health begins. All right, jumping back over here. Well, Saghi, how are you doing?
Amazing today.
And I hope that's actually sharing the right screen here, because it's not highlighting the way Zoom usually does. But you know what? If it's not, I'll put it in there and post, and that's life, right? Well, like I said, I am joined with Saghi. Saghi is an accomplished personal injury attorney. He's the founder of Sheked Law, where he has championed the rights of accident victims for more than 2 decades. He is best known for his expertise in trucking litigation and wrongful death cases, fighting tirelessly to secure justice for families who have suffered tragic losses. A Florida Bar board-certified civil trial lawyer and a member of the New York Bar, Siggy has earned recognition amongst the top 100 trial lawyers in the nation and was named one of Florida's up-and-coming attorneys early on in his career. Over the years, he's obtained numerous multi-million-dollar settlements and jury verdicts, including, of course, some of the biggest names out there. But beyond the courtroom, his dedication to compassionate client service and his high-quality representation has helped shape the legal landscape in South Florida. His story of relentless advocacy and remarkable success makes him an inspiring voice in the field of personal injury law, and I'm excited to get to know him today. Having said all that, there's so much I'm sure I missed in that little introduction, so my very first question to you, Saghi, as always, is, what did I miss?
Wow, no, I'm first of all, I'm humbled by your background on me. That sounds very nice. I never really like to talk about myself or brag about myself. I can just tell you a couple of highlights. So I'm past president of the Southern Trial Lawyers Association. That compromises the 13 southern states. So that was about 2 years, no, 3 years ago now. I was president. Now I'm past president. One of the things that I like to do a lot is teach. So on top of being a good lawyer, I like to teach younger lawyers and other lawyers how to do it the right way, because there's ways to do it. And if you're going to be effective in communicating what you're going to say, you have to learn how to do it. It's not something innate to anyone. It requires practice, practice, and more practice. So I teach across the country, whether it's a couple of weeks ago, I was in New Orleans teaching. Next month, I'm going to be in New Jersey teaching the New Jersey trial lawyers about traumatic brain injuries. In California, I'm going to be teaching in June, and then in June, I'm also teaching in Tennessee. So I'm all over the country teaching other lawyers and trial lawyer organizations how to, whether it's trial advocacy or how to recognize, how to work up, how to try a traumatic brain injury case or a wrongful death case. Most of the time dealing with trucking cases. That's what I'm doing. And then the other thing is I'm also board certified by the National Board of Trial Advocates. So that's board certified by the Florida Bar and the National Board of Trial Advocates. I've authored articles in the past on top of the teaching, again, just trying to share wisdom. And then, I have a podcast as well that, I like to share information with other people, lawyers, and clients, so they know what to look for in their cases and how to get better. Figured I've been doing this now 25 years. And so one of the things I can do by giving back is teaching the younger generation. And when I teach, I try to teach both sides, but mainly, just so we're fair and honest, is really people representing people. I'm not into helping insurance companies screw people. So this is mainly helping the little guy and the person that helps the little guy. So that would be kind of me.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's awesome. And the fact that you do so much teaching, you're jet setting around and everywhere else is amazing. I'm going to throw up right here. If you go to shekedlaw.com and then go to About and Podcast, you can actually take a look at his podcast. It looks like it is on YouTube. It may be elsewhere as well. Let's see, listen now. Yeah, there we go. So it looks like 15, 20-minute episodes or something like that. So if you're looking to learn, it sounds like you are quite the teacher, quite proficient. And I'm going to dig in a little bit because I do want to talk about TBIs and truck accidents and what your role as an educator is. So we're going to come back to that concept in a little bit. But before we do that, obviously you can talk about the education stuff, but you do have a law firm. You're on the masthead.
I do.
And I know that you practice at least in Florida, but tell my listeners a little bit more about your actual practice. Who all do you help? How often? How do people find you? Why do they come to you, and what sets you apart from everyone else? I mean, you already kind of hinted at it with some of the things you said, but give me your elevator pitch, if you will, Siggy.
Sure. So what we do is we do personal injury really with a subset focusing on trucking cases, motorcycle cases, auto cases. We do handle other types of claims because there's other lawyers in the office, and I don't want to take credit for everything. This is a team approach. The other attorneys in the office are awesome. My team, my staff is awesome. They make me look good. They make our team look good and the firm look good. So a lot of it is because of the staff, but mainly we're looking at is trucking cases, whether it's against Amazon, Federal Express, UPS, or other trucking companies that put these dangerous drivers on the road. Nobody wakes up one day and says, I'm going to be a dangerous driver. But what happens is if they don't monitor and supervise their employees, they're putting on, people who are tired, who are fatigued, or have injuries, and they shouldn't be on the road. And then, unfortunately, people's lives change. So you have people who tragically have been killed in accidents, and that destroys a family. Then you have people who've been maimed, become paraplegics, quadriplegics, get brain injuries. We do a lot. It seems like more and more of our cases are brain injury focused, where people recognize that I do speak across the country and continuously teach and educate. So we get involved with a lot of brain injury work, whether it's from other lawyers or other law firms. They bring us in to try the case, and a lot of times we get cases from former clients or people who just search the web and want someone who really understands traumatic brain injuries. Because you can say traumatic brain injury all day long, but if you don't show it, you don't really show the jury what the person has gone through. And it's kind of what I say on my podcast. And also when we're in trial, I'm just not going to say traumatic brain injury. I'm going to show what that person went through, how it affects their life, the duration, the intensity, the frequency, how interfering it is with their life. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. We handle, again, trucking cases that deal with wrongful death, deal with traumatic brain injuries, and other types of personal injury cases, but the bulk of them are either auto, motorcycles, or trucks dealing with wrongful death and brain injuries and other orthopedic injuries.
All right. We're going to dive into that in a little bit because I really do want to pick your brain on this topic. But let's go a little general first, just so people get a chance to know you. So my first question really is what got you into law? Did you grow up on Perry Mason reruns? Were you the kid that just always knew, everyone else is playing G.I. Joe and you're playing Perry Mason or Matlock, or I'm trying to think of the other famous attorneys from 20 some odd years ago on TV. Or did you just kind of stumble into law? Was it kind of an accidental happy thing, or you're just like, I know this is my path and this is what I'm doing? And then what got you into PI law in particular, personal injury law?
So growing up, I did like GI Joes, by the way. I had all the little GI Joes. So growing up, my
Best choice.
parents would
My goodness.
always. You like GI Joes as well?
Oh, I had the whole bin of them. We had a couple hundred of them. I was an only child, so GI Joe was my best friend growing up. Him and the
Gotcha,
Ninja Turtles, but
gotcha. Hovercraft and everything.
yeah.
So, growing up, my dad and my mom would always say that I'd always have like a little, like suitcase, not a suitcase, but like a bag as if I was a lawyer. And then they knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I think my dad also pushed me in that direction, which I'm glad he did because I really do love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. Of course, if I could have played basketball in the NBA and, been a star in the NBA, I would have rather do that. But given that I had limited skills on the basketball court, I was left with law. So that was my second passion. I still love basketball. I'm just, how many people make it to the NBA? You're talking about 400 out of 8 billion people in the world, or however many billion we have. So law is something that I've always wanted to do. I knew since high school early on that I was going to be a lawyer. And in terms of personal injury, coming out of law school, I thought I wanted to do criminal defense work, right? I'm all about, fighting for the little guy, always, going against, the corporations or against the state. People sometimes get wrongly accused. I want to be able to help people. So as soon as I finished law school, my first job out of law school was a criminal defense firm. I had first interned at the public defender's office, got to try some cases, and then went to an attorney that handles criminal defense work. And right away, I found out that criminal defense work, not for me. We had a very odd case where a guy was accused of, beating up his girlfriend or wife. I can't remember. This is like 25 years ago almost. And, we were at the bond hearing. We get him off. He comes back on the street again. And he ended up arguing with his wife and took an axe and cut off her arm. And I'm like, geez, this is not what I want to get involved in. This is not what I signed up for. Like I'm looking to help like innocent people, not help people who are guilty or sound like they're guilty of what they're doing. And I'm like visiting the jails every day. It wasn't my thing. So criminal defense was very short-winded for me. And I switched immediately to personal injury, but I did defense work first. So first I went to a civil defense firm.
Gotcha.
And then you want me to continue or?
Yeah, I'm assuming because when you start doing the defense side, I know a lot of people who follow that trajectory and eventually they go to plaintiff law specifically because it doesn't, just like defending someone who then cuts off his wife's arm, it doesn't sit well when you start to see. I'm curious, you tell me your trajectory. I don't want to force my
Sure, sure.
understanding. Think your trajectory is. You tell me your story, but I do want to know this. It's fascinating.
So I get to do civil defense. They have us defending, at the beginning, we're doing what they call premises liability on someone's corporate premises, whether it's malls or apartment complexes. And then I fell into nursing homes, nursing home defense, and defending nursing homes. And the firm, at the time, there was no Zoom. You're thinking, go back to the year 2000, right? There's no such thing as Zoom back then. That's 25 years ago. And so, I'm flying with the senior partners across the country to defend these horrific cases that eventually settled. They're confidential, so I can't really talk a lot about them. But these cases that were horrible, and what the defense was doing in the nursing homes were doing was also horrible care that they were providing to the elderly patients. I got a chance to see what the plaintiffs' lawyers, meaning the lawyers representing the people, were doing at the time, how they worked up these cases. So for the next 3+ years, I'm sitting there doing defense work of nursing home cases and premises cases, and got to work with a bunch of great attorneys, learned a lot. And then it came to a point where I was at a mediation, and the mediator was, why are you on the defense? You should bring, your skills and talent on the plaintiff side. And I've always wanted to do plaintiff's work, which is, again, because I always like fighting for the little guy, or gal. And I'm like, well, can you help me get a job? It's not that easy right now to find a job. And so the mediator got me 2 interviews. The one job I wanted, I couldn't get because it was a conflict, because our firm, the defense firm I was at, had a case against the firm that I wanted to go to. It was closer to my house and everything. So I ended up taking the second option, which turned out, again, everything works out for a reason. I get the second job, plaintiff's work. And then so I left the defense firm, had a great, again, time and experience, learned a tremendous amount, and then went to do plaintiff's work. And that was with an attorney named Brett Weinberg. Great guy. He taught me a lot. We got to try cases together. And I had a stint with him, was about, I think, 3 years. And then after that, I partnered with one of my friends. I left Brett's office because I wanted to start my own firm. Partnered up with one of my friends. That lasted for about a year and a half. And for various reasons, we ended up separating that law partnership, and I started my own firm. I want to say back in 2007, which is the same firm we have right now, 18 years later. And that's kind of how we got to the personal injury angle of it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, and that's kind of the trajectory I expected. A little bit of a different, but it makes sense. This is a random question, and I hear this a lot, and I've never asked this before, so I'm curious to get your insight on this. What is it like splitting off from somebody when you've been in a firm for a while? I mean, I have to assume it's always going to be different. Sometimes you split because there's just irreconcilable differences, just like in a marriage that falls apart. But sometimes it's friendly, but you're just like, I need to do my own thing. Like when you split off from Brett, what was that like? Was that a friendly, amicable split? And then you said you split from another friend
Right.
as well. Were those all amicable? What is that like as the attorney going through that process?
So I've heard people who've had battles. Thankfully, we were able to agree on both splits. It worked out nicely. And I never like to fight with people if we can work it out. Same thing in our cases. If we can work it out, I'm going to try to work it out. There's no sense in doing stuff that's unnecessary. But if you're not being logical, you're not being fair, then, we're going to have to fight. But in those cases, we came to an agreement, and everybody, look, I always tell even lawyers that worked with me and for me in the past, if they're looking to do their own thing, I'm going to support it, because as long as you're not trying to screw me, you know what I mean, or hurt our clients, then I'm going to help you establish your own firm, and tell you the struggles that I went through at the beginning, because there are struggles. You're learning stuff that you've never done before. You know, opening your own firm. Where do you deal? Where do you get this? Where do you get that? How do you handle vendors? How do you handle, having overhead? Trust accounting, all types of issues. So again, I like helping people, so long as it's friendly and cordial and no one's trying to, it's the only word I can think of right now, is screw the other person, then, I'm going to help. So sometimes I've seen it with friends where they get into litigation and it becomes a battle. Thankfully, that wasn't the case in any of my, departures. I always just wanted to do my thing because a partnership wasn't working for me for various reasons. And I think it was mutual for both sides. So it ended up working out for me.
That makes sense. You said, and I think this is interesting. You said, as long as they're not going to hurt your own clients, you're happy to help anybody. I'm curious about your role as an educator, because do you ever feel like you're training your competition, or does that matter? Or you just, I'm always out of state, so it doesn't matter anyway because they're not here in Florida? Or how does
No,
that
no,
play?
I do teach in Florida too. And I do have it on my podcast. So am I giving away every single secret? No, not on the podcasts. On sessions where they're not recorded, meaning you can't get them on the internet or anywhere. Yeah, I will give away a lot more of the details and the intricacies of what we do. On the recorded sessions, I'm still going to share a lot of the information. So give you an example. If we're talking about how to recognize a traumatic brain injury, because I find that a lot of the young lawyers, and just like me when I was younger, I did not know certain things. And until I went to a continuing legal education class or a class on brain injuries, I wouldn't have been able to recognize it, because when I first started out early in my career, I was focused on what they call orthopedic injuries, the broken bones, the herniated discs, and that's all I knew. I failed to recognize when I was that younger lawyer, hey, you don't need to have loss of consciousness to have a traumatic brain injury. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was what the literature said. And I didn't know, because you hear the insurance adjusters, they're like, oh, he didn't lose consciousness. You can't have a brain injury. Well, that's not true. That's not what the literature says. But if you don't know what you don't know, right? So
Yeah.
constantly going to classes, constantly reading, constantly trying to get better. And then you realize, whoa, I do know what I'm doing. And then you're getting results after results after results. And the juries recognize that I know what I'm doing. Insurance companies recognize I know what I'm doing. And now I'm teaching it because I think it's only fair to clients out there. Not necessarily, I don't have all the clients in the world. We're a small firm. But there's other lawyers that don't necessarily recognize it or know how to deal with it once they get it. Right. And so if I can help them get better, that means other people's clients are getting better results. And that's what we're really looking for, to help people. So that's when I teach, it's helping people. I may never see the people, maybe never get the case. And that's not the goal of teaching. The goal is, again, just to share the wisdom that other people have shared with me. So the plaintiff side can get better at getting resolution and fair compensation and justice for their clients.
Gotcha. I'm gonna come back to this because I do think it's a really fascinating topic. I'm curious though. You're down in Florida, and Florida, obviously, about 4 or 5. It's already been 5 years, been half a decade, but the whole world went through this pandemic not that long ago. God willing, we won't see any more of those. But I found it interesting because every single state encountered different procedures, different changes, different suggestions, different mandates, etc. So I'm curious, how did your law firm, Saghi, how did it weather the both COVID, but also the ramifications, the fallout from COVID, the lockdowns, the separations, etc. Did you, move to doing a lot more Zoom stuff with clients? Did you have to zoom into courtroom hearings and depositions? Did you ever have to present in front of a Zoom jury, or was it pretty much very normal for you guys?
So prior to COVID, every deposition would be a live deposition. So we would be out of the office, or mediation. We would go out of the office, or hearing. You'd have to leave the office, head downtown, whether it's downtown Fort Lauderdale, downtown Palm Beach, downtown Miami, or cases we have throughout the state in Orlando or Tampa or Jacksonville. You'd have to leave the office, get on a flight or drive, and your whole day is shot. Now, since COVID, because of Zoom, again, prior to COVID, I'll be honest, I never heard of Zoom, period. But I think everybody knows Zoom now, or the equivalent. I think there's Microsoft Teams or whatever else there is out there. But COVID has changed the way lawyers across the country practice. And I can tell you from my standpoint and the friends that I know in Florida and across the country, having a Zoom deposition is better. Number one, you have access to all your files in a matter of seconds. You can share a screen in seconds. It makes life easier. Even when I'm at a hearing, instead of carrying those big notebooks with all the exhibits and tabbed and everything, I can do it now within seconds. I can share something. I can highlight something within seconds. I can blow it up. It makes life a lot easier. Same thing when you're presenting. It's good to present in person, but when you're at your desk and you can really have the whole file in an instant access, life becomes better. So from one standpoint, um, you know, trying a case we haven't done on Zoom. I know some people have. I think it's really hard to do. I think it's hard to connect the same way. Like I think I connect much better in person than I do on a Zoom. You can get more of the person's, body reactions, their face, you can see their face, but how their body reacts to certain things, if you're making a connection, if you're not. So I think in person is always better to try a case. In terms of Zoom, COVID did make a difference. It helped us be more efficient, both the defense and the plaintiff's bar, where for insurance companies, for example, if you're doing defense work, they would not want to pay you for traveling to and from a deposition. So here you can just take your deposition by Zoom, you're in and out, and you move on to the next thing. So it's made us more efficient. Now, in terms of cases, so COVID you talked about a lockdown. I was in Florida at the time and still am in Florida. So we didn't have the lockdowns that some of the other states had. I think we had a couple of weeks of lockdown. And then so long as you wore your mask, you were able to continue working and you didn't have to be remote working. Whereas some states, I think up until this year, are still doing remote work. So we were able to get back in the office and do work, and it wasn't as bad in terms of case intake, how many cases came in. So I think for the first part, when people weren't on the road as much, then obviously intake went down, but we're not a volume practice. I don't have hundreds of files. I know I have some friends who have 500-600 cases a month, or I don't think I've seen 500-600 cases in 10 years. It's not the practice that we have. Some firms deal with smaller cases and they'll, get them turned over really fast. We don't really take on those smaller cases. So when we get a case, generally insurance companies are fighting. They're not running to pay. Brain injuries, insurance companies don't believe in brain injuries. So you need to work up the case and get the case ready for trial and sometimes try the case. So COVID, I'm sure had an impact on a lot of firms. It had an impact on us in terms of Zoom and everything. Case intake, it didn't really change for us because, again, most of my cases come from other lawyers and then former clients and then people who find us online. But we don't do major advertising, so we don't get the volume. And I don't want the volume of cases. We're not built that way to handle. I don't have an army of 100 people just processing papers. We really take the case, work the case. I spend a lot of time with the clients, preparing them for depositions, preparing them for anything we have in the case, whether it's a mediation or for trial. And so we really focus group our cases. We really think about them. We mock try them. We want to really develop our themes on the case. So from that perspective, we got more time from COVID than we had before because we spent less time traveling on the cases. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, that's a good answer, and it gives me an idea of, again, different states had very different reactions to it, and then some of them are still just now getting close to normal, and even then, some of them aren't they may never get back to normal entirely. So it's fascinating to hear. I know Florida was a little more, I'll say, libertarian in their approach early on compared to a lot of other states. I talked to people from California and New York and whatnot, and I talked to people from Texas and Florida, and everyone had different need. But even within a state, I talked to people from California, and they're up in Northern California, and it was very normal. And I talked to people that were in Southern California and LA or whatever, and they're still not even close to back to normal. So it is fascinating. I like your insight. I think it's absolutely correct that it's hard to read body language via Zoom. I mean, even here, and I make this point occasionally. My listeners have probably heard me say this before, but we're trying to have eye contact, you and me, and I've learned over the years to shrink my Zoom window and put it up under my camera so that when I'm looking at you, it looks like I'm looking at you, even though it's not. And I think they have stuff now that can auto correct your eyes, so it looks like you're always making eye contact. Although I think sometimes it like gives you bug eyes or doesn't let you blink or something, so it still looks weird if gives you an uncanny valley sort of a thing. But I've always been fascinated by the concept of like a Zoom trial because some part of me thinks it would be more objective, but also a lot of me is like, that would be terrible because then you can't see the jury. I had somebody make the comment once. He said one of the things about you be doing plaintiff law is, or defense, it doesn't matter which side. The other side, the opposing counsel says something, and you know that what they just said, you got them, right? And he says the number one thing, the most important thing is to be able to look over at the jury. And maybe it's the foreman, maybe it's just, juror number 6 or whatever. But you look at them and they look at you and there's that instant connection. You're like, yeah, you heard, you heard what he said, and that's going to stick. And you can communicate that in an instant with an eye contact. But of course, via Zoom, I can eye
You
contact
lose
all
it.
I want, but you do lose that. So, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the concept of a Zoom trial. I guess it would depend on if I'm the plaintiff or the defense, and if I thought they gave me a better shot either way. Related question. I didn't do this in the pre-roll with you, but I'm always curious. Have you ever been on a jury yourself?
Yeah, so every time I go down there, I really do want to sit on a jury. Last time I got called was about a year ago. And it's funny because when I went there to do jury selection, it was a personal injury case this time. The last time was a criminal defense case. So it was a personal injury case. At that time, yeah, COVID already passed. So personal injury case, the defense lawyer was a lawyer that I had tried cases against. I knew him. Very good guy, very good lawyer. And it was so interesting sitting from the jury's perspective because I got to see and get a different appreciation for what jurors are going through. Like, if you're not ready, you're sloppy in terms of your papers are all over the place and you don't communicate confidence, the jury sees that. One lawyer was smooth. The other lawyer was fumbling, was just not good. Everything was a scripted question. I didn't get that contact with that lawyer. We didn't make contact, not necessarily eye contact, but we just didn't connect. Where the other lawyer, he connected. He had people laughing. I even told him afterwards, I'm like, man, you did a good job. At least I know my next trial, I know what I'm going to do against you. So it was really interesting to sit there and connect. Now, one of the things you do have to consider is so we were in jury selection. They didn't pick anything yet. And as we're going down the elevator, all the jurors, the potential jurors, people had already made up their mind. They didn't hear any evidence. And I'm like, oof, this is not good. What if I was the lawyer and they already made up their mind? So stuff like that is always something to think about. You never know what could happen with a jury. You're rolling dice. Both sides are really rolling dice. You never know. There's no guarantees. And that's why, we'll sit there and we'll focus group a case. We'll mock try a case. We'll try to see what themes resonate and what themes don't resonate. So think about, for people who are my age or a little younger, will know about the O.J. Simpson trial, right? Johnny Cochran, while great lawyer and only good things to say about him, who came up with, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit? That was a focus group that was watching the trial at the same time. I think there's a movie on this. it's maybe runaway jury or whatever it's called, where they have a focus group watching the jury all at the same time. So in the O.J. Simpson case, they had a focus group watching everything, and they would focus group, on a weekly basis, what's going on with the case. And so one of the potential focus group members, or one of the focus group members, came up with, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. And what a great line, because that resonates now. You're talking, I don't know, 1993 that trial was.
Something
So
like that.
what's that? Yeah, that's like 30 plus years ago. Um, 32 years ago that trial was. And it resonates when you say something like that, that you can then test the message. Does the message make sense? Does it resonate with a jury of your peers? Usually you want to be in the same county where your trial is going to be, because people do think differently. You can see it. Let's just look at the elections, for example, right? You had some states that would never turn Republican, and in some states that'll never turn Democrat. People who live in those states think differently. So for me to do a focus group in, for example, we'll use California. If I'm trying a case in a place that's pure Republican, I'm going to get the wrong signals. I'm not going to know how that group of people think. So I have to really recognize when you're trying a case or who you're trying to deliver the message to, how do those people, wherever part of town that you're in or what county you're in, what appeals to them? And then think about that and what will resonate with them, because what resonates with one group does not resonate with another group. So that's kind of how we do things in terms of, trying to figure out where we're going with these cases.
Gotcha. I'm just still fascinated that you got on a jury, especially in current law practice. It's a question I ask a lot of attorneys, and oftentimes, if they've ever been on one, it was before they went to law school. And they're like, as soon as they know you're an attorney, they kick you out. So the fact that they knew that you were an injury attorney, in fact, and left you in is
No,
fascinating.
no, they didn't leave me in.
Oh, they
I
did
was
kick you.
just there for the jury selection.
Okay,
And
I thought you
then
they left you in past jury selection. The way I read your story was that you got in, you stayed in past jury selection. So,
no, no,
okay,
they had
okay,
jury selection throughout the whole day. And then they eventually,
was
what
dismissed.
they do is they select who they want, and both sides want people that are good for them. And then they kick out the people they don't want. And I found out later on that my friend, who's the defense lawyer, says he didn't want me. While
Hmm.
he thinks I could be fair, he was too concerned that I understand the way the defense plays these games, and how it's a racket for them. So like, if any of the listeners here go to a jury trial, if you see a defense expert, just know, hopefully the lawyer who's on the plaintiff's side does a good job exposing the defense expert. If they're there, those defense experts are hired guns. They're hired by the defendants to say the person's not injured, the person's going to get better right away, there's nothing wrong with them. They'll come up and say anything. They'll look at, films, and they'll make up stuff. This is what they do. They get paid, on a yearly basis, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars, to say people aren't injured from these accidents. And it's really horrible that, they sell their soul to the devil, but that's what they do. A good injury lawyer will expose that. Injury lawyer that, doesn't have the experience, or maybe is a little younger. And this isn't a knock on younger lawyers. I was a younger lawyer, but you just get better over time. Unlike basketball, because we used basketball before, right? As you get to be older, like me, your body breaks down. Well, in the law, you get better. You should be getting better because you're going to classes, you're getting better, you're trying things, you're learning things, you're adapting, you're making, strategic decisions to get better, you're testing your messages. So you always want to get better in time. So I didn't get picked for the criminal case or the civil case, but it was an experience. And then, he told me he didn't want me on the jury because I'm a plaintiff's guy. I know what the defense does. And he's ultimately concerned that it would be a great verdict for the plaintiffs. And of course, I was going to sit there and listen to all the evidence, but I would be skewed a little bit with, if it's the same defense experts that I see all the time that just blatantly lie and get away with it because other lawyers just don't know how to expose them.
It shows real insight that you're self-aware, right? And you say, I think I could be objective, but I also know that I have bias. And I think that is really kind of a fascinating approach. So you said something here, and this will lead me to my next set of questions. And I think it's, again, it's just true. In your line of work, especially, I would expect over time you get better because experience is just the best teacher, as opposed to basketball, eventually your knees just give out, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, the
Or
more
have to be.
the more you have experience, the more experience, really with anything, you think about it, an electrician, the more experience that electrician has, the faster they'll be the next time they get to a job site. I've seen that. I've done that. I know how to fix this. And so if an electrician comes to your house and fixes your electricity or fixes it within 5 minutes because that person's got like 30 years experience, as opposed to someone who just came and is taking hours and hours and hours, you
Mhm.
really can't get mad and not pay them because it took them 5 minutes. That takes years of understanding to get there. Same thing in law. I mean, I can tell if a case is good right away. I don't need to go through, a year with the case. I mean, if something happens during the case, there are things that can happen that can make a case bad. But right away, I know if this is a case I want to take or not. And again, that's only from experience, from making a lot of wrong decisions over the years where you get better and better.
Let's talk about those wrong decisions because I'm sure in, 20 years plus of law, you've had a few setbacks, you've had a few moments that are what you would consider to be a failure. But I'm a firm believer, as my listeners know, that a failure is only a failure if you don't learn from it. And if you do learn from it, it's a slow burn win, right? So, Siggy, can you let my listeners know about maybe one time in your practice of law where you failed, right? Or you experienced the setbacks, and maybe it was just you didn't have the documentation right. Maybe the jury went the way you didn't think they were going to go, or whatever. But what did you learn from that, and how do you carry that forward to always make sure you're giving the best care to your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing this 25 years. I'm not undefeated, right? Anyone who tries a lot of cases, you're going to lose some cases. And there's always like a saying, you're going to lose the cases you shouldn't lose, and you're going to win the cases you shouldn't win. I don't necessarily agree with that saying. Um, Sometimes you lose a case because I never want to say I lost a case because of preparation. I just maybe lost a case because of intake, meaning I shouldn't have necessarily taken that case. Something that you learn again with experience. Sometimes you make bad decisions. I mean, when I did lose, anytime I win or lose, right? I always go back and say, what did I learn from this? Because every time you call it a loss, I call it learning. Um, what do we learn from that event? How can I get better? What did I do wrong? Where can I fix it? Those are the types of things. So there was one case out there that we tried, I want to say back in 2010, maybe 2008. I can't remember exactly the year. I tried it and I knew it was a tough case. Again, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have taken the case, but at that point in my career, I was trying everything. You give me the case, I'll go try it. I thought I was invincible. I can't lose because I had a nice little streak going on. And then you get humbled and you're like, oh, I can lose. So that's not a good thing. So you learn from it. It's a case where I wanted to win and I really thought I was going to win. In hindsight now, again, I don't know why I took that case, but we made some arguments that looking back, I wish I would have framed them differently. Knowing what I know now, again, I think lawyers can be like a fine wine where the longer you harvest it, the longer you keep it, it just becomes better and better and better. Um, so going back to that trial, I mean, I could have done the opening differently. I could have focus grouped that case better, um, tested my theories out, um, done a lot better overall. I mean, looking back right now, I'm reading some of my transcripts from 15 years ago, and I'm like, oof, what was I thinking? But again, you don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
sometimes it takes a couple of beatings to go down there and get better. Like, let's use basketball. I'll stick to basketball. Michael Jordan didn't just come out win every game. He actually lost for years to first to the Celtics, then he would lose to the Pistons until he finally beat the Pistons, and then he went on a 3-0, won three championships, retired, and then won another three championships. And then here's where we say Father Time catches up with you. Again, in law, it gets better. In basketball, old Michael Jordan and the Washington Wizards, or whatever their name was back at the Bullets, I think it was, just wasn't good. It wasn't the Michael Jordan we were used to. So there's always a couple of ways to look at it. You can look at it where, he was in the league 20 years and he only won 6 times. Or you can look at it and he's the GOAT and the greatest ever. Or look at LeBron. He made it to the NBA championship 10 times, but only won 4 times. Nobody
Yeah.
says he's a 6-time loser. They said, hey, he's a 4-time champion and he's the greatest scorer ever. And it's all how you frame things, right? Same thing with law. It's all how you frame things. So I never look at a loss as, and I feel bad for the clients if you lose and when I lost, you never want to lose. I don't want to lose. It's not in my DNA to lose. And it's never because of effort. It's because the case wasn't good or there were things that went wrong. And sometimes things can go wrong in trial. So I look at everything as a learning lesson, whether I win or lose. I'm always learning and trying to get better. So it sucks to lose, I'll tell you that. And it wasn't fun, but it happens. If you're trying cases, it happens. There's no team in any sport that it's never lost a game. And the same thing with there's no trial lawyer that hasn't lost if they're trying enough cases. If you tried 1 or 2 cases, you're probably not going to lose. But when you try, dozens and dozens and dozens of cases, there will be one that you just can't win. It happens.
Yeah. Like a roulette wheel that always comes up red. It's like that's just not gonna you might get it 5 times in a row, but eventually it's
Right.
gonna
It's still
that's
50-50
pure
every
chance.
time.
To be fair, that's pure chance, whereas what you do is definitely skill based, not pure chance, as that's obviously the difference. But well, here's the flip side of that question, though. I'm sure you've had, Sagi, I'm sure you've had a couple of clients or a couple of cases or a couple of moments that are just the feather in the cap, right? The things that you're most proud of. You're falling asleep at night and you think back and oh man, I can't believe that worked out as great as it did. Maybe you thought everything was against you. You thought the jury hated you. You thought the judge was you're on his bad side. There's no way this is going to work out. And then not only did you win, but you won like 3 times or 10 times or whatever you thought you were going to get with your client or something. What's 1 or 2 of your biggest successes, your biggest wins, the proudest moments in your practice of law?
So I'll tell you 2. One, I can't get into too many details, but I'll tell you what I can tell you. We had a case, and I'll try to give, because we signed a confidentiality, and I'll tell you why we signed a confidentiality. They paid us so much money. It settled for, it was a personal injury case. I can't tell you what type. It settled in 2022 in excess of 9 figures is what we're allowed to say. That's in excess of $100 million for a settlement. That wasn't a trial that you went to and never got paid, or where you see sometimes these trials, people go to trials against no defendants. There's nobody there. There's no defense lawyer, and they get this paper judgment and they put it on their site as if they got that money. This was a settlement paid by all the insurance companies involved, in excess of 100 million, 9 figures. I just can't say the amount. And I can't say who it's for, and I can't say what kind of case other than it's a personal injury case. So that was, and working on that case was incredible. Had the case about a year, and we settled it. We took over 40 depositions. It was incredible to be involved in that case. And so that was one of the highlights of my career. I think another highlight that we had, which I can talk about, is I want to say, I don't remember the year, 2017 maybe. I think that's when it was. And we've had some big results in the past, but this one was incredible. We were in trial on a wrongful death case of a young lady. She had 2 sons, a 21-year-old and a 13 or 14-year-old. And we were trying to get this case resolved. We were in Orlando. This one I can talk about because this one did go to trial and there's no confidentiality. So we're allowed to talk about it. We were in Orlando and we're trying to get the case happened in Arcadia, Florida, but the defendants were from Orlando. We were trying to get this case resolved. Went to mediation. We couldn't settle it. Going into trial, I was trying the case against the defense firm I used to work at. In fact, against one of the supervisors that I worked for. So it was really interesting. By the way, he's a great lawyer. He did a great job defending the case. And so as we start the case, they offer us $4 million. And we're like, listen, we need $6 million to get this done. Never going to happen, never going to happen. We start the case, and then one of the witnesses testifies. And this witness, if you looked at him or you saw him when you're walking down the street, you probably get a little scared of him. He's got the tattooed, uh, what do they call it? The drop,
Teardrop or
the
whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess they signify, I don't know if it's true or not. You see this in the movies, the teardrops, they signify you've killed people. What do I know? I don't know. We didn't inquire about that. But here we are, and he's witnessing, he witnessed this accident. And basically, I'll set the setting for you. It's nighttime, it's dark, it's in Arcadia, Florida, which is rural area. There's no real street lamps. It's on a kind of a highway type of setting, one lane each way. So as my client is driving this way, the defendant is here, and he tries to pass three cars and get
Oh,
back in his lane. But as he's passing these three cars, he's not getting back in time, and they head on collide. In the car was mom and her 13 or 14-year-old son. And the car collides. And what happens is it's pitch dark. You can't see anything. The witness gets there, blocks off the area, puts his hazards on, and he says, I can't see anything, but I can hear something. I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I looked in the car and it didn't look good, but I still can't see anything, but I hear something. Like, well, what do you hear? He goes, I hear the sound of a little boy. I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, it's a boy. It's a boy. I mean, well, what is he saying? He's saying, help, help, help. My mommy's dead. My mommy's dead. And here you have this witness now who, remember, he's got the tattoo teardrop. He's crying. And I'm like, oh no, he's crying. The jury's crying. The judge is crying. I'm like, and then he says, sorry, I'm sorry. I lied. I lied. I'm like, what do you mean you lied? He says, I told the boy that his mom was alive. You know, and he's crying and he's crying. He told the boy the mom was alive, and she really wasn't alive, and he didn't know what to say. And, so that was very emotional at the time, you can feel it, right? You can feel what was going on in the air in that courtroom. That's why I don't think Zoom would work. But in any event, that day ended. They cross-examined him, got nothing out of it. I go to Dan Shapiro, who's the attorney on the other side. I'm like, Dan, let's get this case resolved. This family needs closure. I go, get us that 6 and we'll get it done. In the meantime, you got to imagine on the other side. So we're on this side. On the other side, you got the defense lawyers. There's 2 of them. You got the assistants to the defense lawyers. You got all the insurance people in the background from the insurance company. And Dan says, I'll get back to you. Comes back to me. He goes, Saghi, we're going to get this done. I got you $4.1 million. I'm like, come on, man. After that testimony, that was like my best day in court ever. He's like, that's what we got. I'm like, all right, I'm going to communicate it to my client. My client says, no, let's just continue. We continue. Eventually, we do closing arguments. The jury came back with 12.2 million, 12.24 million. And we did get paid on that case. We gave them a discount, so it settled for $10,540,000. That's what it settled for. So case was over. So I would say that was one of the greatest moments we had in trial. There was others that were, amazing stories where you can feel it, running through your body, how the witnesses felt, and when you have the jury crying and the judge crying, and you're so emotional and feeling it, it's impactful. Of course, you can't do that on, my neck kind of hurts case. It has to be the right case to get that. No one's going to cry because your neck hurts, I mean, just not that kind of case.
I'll
But those
cry.
two, well, yeah, maybe from pain, right? So those two were kind of like 2 of my memorable moments. The year working on that case, we settled in excess of 100 million. And then that is one of a couple of trials that really come to mind that were impactful upon me. And I'm so happy I was able to help the family, and we got them justice, and it could have been settled for half that amount.
I guess that's where it becomes a gamble, right? They really you do have to say what are we going to get out of this? What do we stand to lose? And they chose poorly, but that's wonderful for your client, and that's a good
E-
story. It's a good story. On your podcast, you should have a secondary podcast and just tell the good stories because these are the things that people love to hear. It's the top notch law podcast stuff right there. I loved it. That was great.
It's actually a
Um,
good idea.
there you go. Free advice. It's always
There
worth
you
what you
go.
pay
I'll
for it.
take it.
Sometimes
I'll
worth a
take
lot
it.
more as well.
Just don't send
Um,
me a bill.
oh, I'm going to send you the biggest bill ever. Oh, at least 10 million, but I'll settle for 6. Okay,
Yeah.
so just make that decision. Um, so let me ask you kind of a related question. I know that especially in PI law, you deal with just absurdities sometimes, and sometimes it's just I can't believe this shook out this way. I can't believe this guy said this thing or whatnot. What's one of the most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law?
Um, I'm trying to think of one. What people have said or have done.
I mean, just
Um,
something that you're like, it's almost just absurd. Why did this happen this way? Whether it was something somebody said, whether it was a judgment that was rendered, whether, I mean, and it could be good or bad, but I find that attorneys just deal with some of the most absurd moments in human history. I mean, you've already given me a couple, and it's not a good one, but the husband chopping off the wife's arm, like that's absurd, I guess. But
yeah,
like, you know,
completely.
you deal with such weird stuff sometimes. What's one of the standout moments other than that one which I gave you as a freebie?
Yes, you did. I mean, we've had so many different types of cases. I've had we're dealing one right now where a guy's, it's not, I don't know if it's absurd, it's just sad. Guy's walking on the sidewalk, an 18-wheeler loses control, literally goes on the sidewalk, runs him over, and they have to amputate his leg because you got this 18-wheeler running him over his leg. It's horrible. So I don't say that falls into the absurd category, but like sad. Or uh, you've heard of the automatic emergency braking system where cars are driving and it's supposed to stop when it sees a pedestrian. And sometimes they do, and a lot of times they don't. And when they don't, and they're supposed to, and they cause someone some bad injuries, it's, to me, in my mind, it's absurd when the defense tells you, oh, well, it's not really automatic emergency braking system. It doesn't really work that way. I'm like, that's not what you advertised. That's not what you told the public. That's not what you sold us on, right? So absurd, I'd say, is sometimes the positions the defense takes on certain cases that just don't justify that. So a lot of times it's the positions that people take. And I give you another example. I was getting a haircut a couple of years back, and the hairstylist knows what I do, and I do personal injury and I handle injury claims. And he's telling me how he was on a jury and he heard the defense brought in this polished doctor, and he talked so well. And did you know he was getting $1,500 an hour? And he must be good because he's getting $1,500 an hour. I'm like, no, he's getting $1,500 to say that person is not injured. I can't believe you fell for that. And even though I talk to him all the time, so you just don't know, again, how people see things through their lens, right? Everybody comes from a different background and they see things differently. So I don't pretend to know anything. Like, that's why we use the focus groups and we use mock trials, because what I think people think, and I don't read anybody's mind because I don't pretend to know what people are thinking, is I test the message. So this way, if, sometimes things that we think are absurd make logical sense to other people. So I think for me, I'm always learning. Literally every day, I'm learning from people. And by learning, you get smarter. If you think you know everything, that's the problem. And, it's always scary for people who think they know everything. But, when you're younger, you think you know everything. But then when you get older, you realize, oof, there's so much I didn't know. Like, now looking back, I realized, actually, I said this today with a client. Client was 21 today. We did a Zoom. And I go, do you agree with me that today you're 21, you're smarter than you were when you were 10 years old? He goes, uh-huh. And you're smarter than you were when you were 15 years old? Uh-huh. And how about 18? You agree you're smarter today, 3 years later? Because you got more experience in life, right? And so that's why when I'm telling you, that I know what's going to happen because I've seen it in practicing 25 years and I have more life experience. I've just been alive longer and I've been practicing
Been a
more than
lawyer
you've been
longer.
alive. Yeah. I'm like, so listen to what I'm saying. I kind of have an idea, just like you're smarter than we're 10 years old. Think about me and what kind of experience I have. So I'm not just saying things to say things. I kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about. So um, I hear all types of crazy things. So again, the haircut, the the thing that my stylist said was just, I was like dumbfounded that he could think like that. But I guess a good defense lawyer with a bad plaintiff's lawyer will get someone to think wrongly because these
Yeah.
guys are smooth on the other side. They're
Well, and part
smooth.
of it's
They're
also
tested.
it's
Go ahead.
the it's not the imposter syndrome, but like you know what you know, and you know it so well and so virtuously that your assumption is, oh, everyone else knows this. It's commonplace. It's easy to forget the specialization that you have, even though you know that you have the specialization. That's one of those areas you're like, no, that's not how that worked at all. But I can't believe you fell for that. But like the average person, they're not going to know any difference. Like, oh, he's an expert. It says expert right there. He's an expert, right?
Right. And people don't know. So, and this is for all the viewers now. Anywhere in the country, except one or two states, if you see a plaintiff's attorney and a defense lawyer in a trial, you can bet your last dollar, if it's a personal injury case, there's insurance involved. So in Florida, like many other states, if we're bringing a case and it's against an individual, we're not wasting our time if the person doesn't have insurance, but we're not allowed to say that in trial. I am allowed to say it on the podcast, right? Because it's not talking about a specific case. So if you see someone in trial, there's insurance on the other side. That lawyer is not coming in there and doing stuff for free. Lawyers are expensive. They're charging $400, $500, $600 an hour. And they're coming, these defense lawyers who've been doing it for a while, and they're defending these cases. Someone's got to pay them. And the way it works is like this. Someone gets into an accident, and let's say you caused an accident, right? Your insurance company is going to pay for an attempted settlement. If that doesn't settle, your case doesn't settle, there's a lawsuit filed. The lawsuit is then served on you. And then when you're served, your insurance company hires you a defense lawyer. That defense lawyer then will defend you all the way through a trial. But someone's paying that defense lawyer, and it's the insurance company. And someone will pay your settlement, and that'll be the insurance company as well. So if you're in trial, don't get deceived. Those polished experts the defense hires, there's a reason they're schooled. They go to special school to learn. They're not going to admit this, how to testify, how to communicate your message, basically how to deceive the public. This is what it's all about. And of course, insurance companies have a huge lobby group where we can't say the person has insurance. So the jury doesn't even know the person has insurance because the insurance lobby is so big and so strong that they've eliminated that. So there's things in trial we're not allowed to say. One of them is they have insurance, unless you're suing your own insurance company, your uninsured motorist coverage. Then you can say insurance. So don't get
Interesting.
deceived.
Yeah. What do you do when someone comes to you and they were hit by someone without insurance? Like you sue your own insurance? Is that the standard recourse, or because you have to feel for someone in that situation? And I know that there's laws that are out there to protect people, but it still happens, obviously. What's their recourse if they're hit by somebody and it wasn't their fault? The other person was entirely at fault, but they're not insured.
So generally, if the other person doesn't have insurance, you can sue them, but what are you going to get from them? If they don't have money to pay for insurance, how are they going to pay your judgment?
Yeah.
And so we look for uninsured motorist. And what that means is uninsured motorist coverage. So you got to look at your own policy. So right now, anybody who's listening to this, if you have car insurance, I want you to go to your declaration page or your coverages on your application. So if you have Progressive, go to the Progressive app or State Farm or whatever insurance company, look at your coverages. And under coverages, you want to see what do you have for uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, and make sure there's money there. If it's 10,000, 10,000 is all you're going to get. If it's 100,000, 100,000 is all you're going to get. If there's a million, there's a million you're going to get. Because a lot of times, this happens at least once a week, where the person that causes the crash doesn't have insurance or doesn't have enough insurance. And so what do? You can't give up. But if you have uninsured motorists, you can go after your own insurance company for that person's negligence. So what we want to do is make sure you have uninsured motorist coverage. Now, if they don't have, let's say the at-fault driver doesn't have insurance and my client doesn't have uninsured motorist coverage, I don't even know what to tell them. I mean, I've had fatalities where people have died and say, what do you want to do? When I was a younger lawyer, I would file a lawsuit, but then people declare bankruptcy and then we're out of luck. You get nothing. So that's a problem. So you always want to have insurance in case the person that causes a crash doesn't have insurance. Now, also I would say is if people drive around and they have dash cams, those are awesome for accidents. If you have one, if you don't have one, get one. If you have one, make sure you keep the dash cam after a crash because it could save you from a BS lawsuit, or it can help you prove your lawsuit because people they just lie. We dealt with this earlier today with someone clearly lying. That one's going on, so I don't want to say anything to tip off the defense. But we had a case where a client was making a U-turn. Well, our client's going straight. The defendant was making a U-turn, and the impact happened at the intersection. You would think he would say that, the defendant, but the defendant said no. He made the U-turn and was going straight for about 5 to 10 seconds later, and our client hit him in the back. Well, first, the pictures didn't even equate to that. It was a T-bone collision.
Yeah.
And so the guy thought that, we didn't get actually the camera from any dash cam. We got it from, there was a law firm that had a camera facing the street that picked up this whole crash. And this guy still testified that the crash happened the way he said, which is impossible because we had footage of how the crash occurred. So having dash cam is helpful. But going back to what you're saying, if there's no insurance on the other side and my client doesn't have uninsured motorists, I would unfortunately have to tell the client there's nothing we can really do unless the person is independently wealthy and just decides not to buy insurance, which never happens. But it could happen, I guess. Anything's possible. I would have to tell my client if there's no insurance on the person that caused the crash and my client doesn't have uninsured motorist, that there's nothing I can really do for them. To help them. My goal is to try to get them a recovery, a financial recovery, and get justice. But there's no justice if I get them a piece of paper like something like this, and it has, they owe you $1 billion. There's some lawyers who do that, but you never collect the penny out of it. So what I would tell them is go file a lawsuit in small claims court, or file a lawsuit on your own, and then you can get that person's license suspended in Florida until they pay you back or until they do a payment plan. So a lot of times you see people do payment plans that could be $5 a month for the rest of their life. I mean, it's not going to do any good for the clients, but
Right.
It is what it is. That's the law we're facing with right now. Some states have mandatory bodily injury coverage. Florida is not one of those states.
Gotcha. You're talking about the dash cams, but I think it's a fascinating topic. I was actually looking at getting them installed. I have teenage drivers now myself, and I'm like, I probably should have in my own car, but like, if my kids ever get in an issue, I definitely want to make sure that there's evidence as to what's going on. And even if you're at fault, I imagine it still makes sense to have it because it might limit the amount of at fault or show things where they say, well, this and also this or whatnot. But I want to go back to something else you said though, because I do think that technology is really changing the way that these cases are being processed. And something I see coming down, you were mentioning the auto braking. I saw a video the other day, and it blew my mind because I think it was a Tesla, and it was driving, and some lady fell into the street, and it swerved to miss her and caused a head-on collision instead. But it nobody died, if I understand correctly, and it prevented from running over this lady that fell into the street. What do you do in a situation like that? Like, what would you do in a situation like that? Who do you even think would be at fault? Is it the driver? Is it the lady? Is it Tesla? Is it nobody? Is it like where do you see those cases going in the future, Sagi?
I think those are the new type of cases we're going to see. You're going to see a lot of what they call product liability cases, because as 2026 rolls around, I believe there's an initiative, a government initiative, where all new cars starting in 2026 are going to have these automatic emergency braking systems. And so for the plaintiff's lawyer or for the injured person, you're going to see a lot of people instead of bringing what they call general negligence cases against the driver, you're going to see product liability cases against the manufacturer if the product makes a mistake. How many people have had their computer while using it sometimes freeze up? And it's happened to me a bunch of times where you just push that, what do they call it? The Control Alt Delete to get your computer to reboot. It just happens. So, having computers make mistakes, it can happen. They're not perfect. Do they, operate better than humans? Look, humans cause crashes all the time.
Yeah.
We see that, I'm in business because of that. Hopefully there'll never be another crash in the world, and I'll figure a different way to make money. There's a lot of wrongdoers out there, and we can go after the wrongdoers. We'll figure a way to do it. If it's a way that, nobody else gets hurt. I would love for that to happen. I just don't think that's realistic. So just like humans, these computers can make mistakes. And if they make mistakes, it's a software glitch, or we have a case where there's a code glitch. One code line extra could have saved and prevented the occurrence that we have going on in one of our cases. We know that from the experts. So if there's a mistake like that happens, or a computer glitch, the company is going to be on the hook for that, because that could change people's lives. Imagine a computer glitch, or let's say we'll use Tesla or any one of these electric cars that's using a computer, just has a glitch and it runs and kills someone. It's not the human's fault, even though the human's supposed to be driving. But what if it was on automatic and it didn't pick it up? There's lots of videos you can watch on YouTube where the electric cars or the automatic cars are just running red lights. Sometimes they can't see them. There might be a bush blocking it, where a human would say, you know what, I'm going to slow down for this. The AI or the electric car doesn't pick it up. So you're going to have a case against Tesla. And Tesla's known for fighting it tooth and nail to the end. That's the general consensus. Whether they're right or wrong, that's up for the jury to decide. I don't know. I'm just saying what people are repeating, that they fight their cases. And maybe rightfully so, and maybe not. I don't know.
It's a fascinating new world into which we are going. And, I think once everyone has auto-driving cars and nobody's behind the wheel, maybe it'll be a lot safer. I know that, like, statistically they're safer, right? They'll log millions of drive hours compared to the average person who'll log thousands of drive hours before they get into an accident. Like, it seems like, at least on paper, if everyone is using the system, it's probably better. But my wife is very inclined to not trust such machinery, so I don't know.
Yeah, not
I don't know
yet.
what.
Me neither. I'm scared to just let it drive, or if you take your, there's videos you can see people dying
Yeah,
because they trusted the car to drive on its own. And
yeah.
and sometimes I
I saw.
guess maybe it has to see so many different scenarios to know. I don't know.
How to play through it. I saw a video the other day, and it was one of those. It's a rental car that you can get in the back of. It's like a taxi, but there's no driver, and it got into a parking lot and got stuck doing circles, and the guy couldn't get out. He was like on
That's
call with tech support.
hilarious.
He's like, I can't get out. And like, well,
That's
we need you
awesome.
to reset the system for us. I'm like, I'm in the car stuck. Help me get out of this car or whatever. So, brave new world that has such technology in it.
I love it. I love it. That's
Um,
awesome.
Let me ask you one more question, and then we'll start wrapping down. I don't want to take up your whole day, but I really do appreciate you taking this time. I know as a PI law guy, you deal with some horrific things, right? You have to look at horrific accidents. You have to see blood and gore and guts. Like, it's just a part of your job. And I know that other people have that too. Doctors, nurses, they deal with trauma. Does that ever get to you? How do you get past the the shock of it? And are you just desensitized, or do you just compartmentalize and like, well, I put on my lawyer hat today, and yeah, this is a horrible thing, and here's blood and guts and gore and everything else, but I'm just going to get through it? Or does it ever get to you, and what do you do when it does?
I think they all get to me. From it gives you some sort of PTSD. I don't think I've been diagnosed with that, but I get on the road. I'll give you an example, and I talk about this on my podcast. I get on the road. I'm scared to get near 18 wheelers. I mean, I've seen some horrible things where people are on the road and those wheels, because they didn't do their pre-trip inspection, fly off and smash into another car, or I've seen wheels fly off and smash into a pedestrian. I have a video where I told you we recently got this case. The guy's walking on the sidewalk and the 18-wheeler just jumps onto the sidewalk and just runs over the person. And I'm not saying all truck drivers are bad. They're not. There's really good truck drivers out there, but there's really bad ones too. Just like in every industry, you have some great doctors, and you have some bad doctors. So, I mean, you kind of from the incident standpoint, sometimes you see them and you're like, oof, like you just get paranoid in everything that you're doing. Like I get in an Uber and I'm like, obviously I'm putting on my seatbelt on right away. I'm like, listen, I need you to drive slow and safe. I'm okay with arriving a little bit late or taking a little bit longer to get there. I don't need a speed racer or anything like that, just because you see some horrible things. So in terms of the injury side, I mean, it hits close to home. I had a cousin who was killed on a motorcycle accident many, many, many years ago. I was maybe a 1 or 2 year lawyer at the time, and it was uh, pretty impactful upon my life. We were close. I had another cousin spend months in the hospital from a motorcycle accident. So these kind of things hit you when you see it, or we have cases where you have the loss of a loved one. Sometimes it's the loss of a child, and that hits you really hard. How can the family continue moving forward, or they lose their father or mother? How can they continue to move forward? And you got to really help them out, and it's tough. It really, like, sometimes you don't sleep at night because their whole case is dependent on you, and you have some lawyer on the other side, on the defense side, and all they want to do, again, they sell themselves to the devil. They want to screw this family from getting compensation, justice and compensation. And my job is I have to perform. I have to put my A game on because I care for the family. And, this didn't have to happen. Almost every one of my cases, it didn't have to happen. We have a case right now where actually it's going on. So I'll tell you vaguely. Um, they turned the power on when the guy was in a machine with blades, and he didn't have to die. They should have had a safety check in place or a spotter before they turned the power on in this major power plant. And this guy gets chopped up and dies. It didn't have to happen. There's safety protocols in place that they should have followed. They had the safety protocols. They just didn't follow them. And this guy's life gets impacted. He's got a wife. He's got 3 children, all under the age of 15. There's a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 14-year-old. I mean, life is completely tragically destroyed for this family. And so I see that, and we deal with a lot of that. Or sometimes, today we dealt with a brain injured individual and what he's going through and the struggles that people have after a brain injury. Where again, the defense will make it seem like they're back to normal, where they might look normal. They'll look like you and I, Justin, right? But you don't know what's going on in their brain. That CPU, right? The brain is the CPU. And if that computer freezes or doesn't work properly or is slow, that's going to impact a person. So yeah, it's really hard. There's days that are our challenges, especially when we're talking about the client's injuries and they get to hear that, like we're at a mediation and we're talking about all their deficits or what people say about them and how they're different. It's challenging. But that's what keeps me going, to making sure they can get justice for what happened. And hopefully, we've had, I'll give you an example. We had a case against the hospital where a young woman was raped at the hospital because they didn't have the 2-adult rule. I can't tell you which hospital it was because it is confidential, the settlement. But one of the things we were able to do with that case was make sure, because the client wasn't so much interested in money, she was interested to ensure that this doesn't happen to another woman ever again, or a man. It could happen to a man, right? Or a young boy, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a brother, where you have a male on female. You have to have another person in the room. So let's say there's a male doctor or a male tech with a female patient. You have to have a female nurse in the room, or a female a medical assistant, someone to ensure that the male, and I'm not saying it's always males, it can be females too, but someone to ensure that if you do have someone who's a deviant, they don't do something to these people who are in vulnerable positions. It's not right, it's not fair, but things happen. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the positive things that, you go back to say one of the proud things. I'm very proud of that because hospitals now nationwide have changed the way they do things because they do have now two adults in the room, or they should, or they said they would, right? They
Yeah.
said they changed their policies. Whether they did or not, is a different story, but hopefully that made, hospitals safer, right? So you have people think of, lawyers as greedy trial lawyers. That's all they want is money. It's not true. We want things to get better. Again, we can always find a different avenue to make money in and fix that area. But in this setting, in the hospital setting, we made those hospitals better and safer for patients.
Awesome. And yeah, I've looked at law in the past. I thought about going to law school when I was younger, and uh, I looked at a couple different facets, and I thought one of the ones I didn't think I could do would be criminal law, specifically for the reasons you outlined before. Even though I've talked to a number of criminal attorneys, and I fully respect them because you know they're making sure that the American system works, that everyone gets their fair shake. Like there's a real virtue to that. But then you deal with the horrific side of injuries as well, the broken families. You're at least there trying to put them together, which I think has to be, a wonderful thing. I've always said I respect that about PI lawyers. I mean, you guys get the ambulance chaser, nonsense, but you're there as a stopgap, right? When people can't afford an attorney, you guys work in such a way that they're more likely to get justice than they would otherwise because you're coming in, you're saying, "Hey, I think your case has merit. I'll represent you, no cost unless we are able to win." I think that's a brilliant strategy. Like it really is just, it's just. It is just. It is a just and fair way to do it. So I've always really respect that about the PI law space. So well, I don't want to take up your whole day. I think we had a wonderful conversation. I could keep this up for another hour, but I'm sure you've got places to be and whatnot as well. So here in a minute, I'm going to ask you my two closing questions, just to put those in your head and let you percolate on them. Question number one, Siggy, is just going to be: if you can go back in time, meet young Siggy, what advice would you give yourself and why? Maybe fresh out of law school, or even right before you got out of law school. And then question number two is going to be: if I gave you my magic pen, this is an InkJoy four-color pen, writes super smoothly, and apparently it can change laws, add laws, or edit laws that are on the books. And if I loaned you this pen and you could make one change, what change would you make and why? While you percolate on that, we're going to jump over and take another look at your website. This is Justin West with the Attorney Post. I have been talking with Sagi Shaked of the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Sheked Law. That is shekedlaw.com. Link, as always, down below in the description. Before we continue, I'm going to read from our final sponsor. Our last sponsor today is Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing your law firm or your company credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than it is science? What if there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, Reuters, and others, and see those articles ranking locally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for? But what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and permanently. This is functionally guaranteed SEO, or search engine optimization, on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or firm, visit rankwith.news to learn more. Book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build more credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com. Alrighty, as always, we will have links to all of our sponsors down below as well at the bottom of the description. And of course, Sagi and his law firm we will have right at the top. So if you guys want to get all of him, that's where you go. So question number one, we go back in time, we see young Sagi, and you're able to give him a little bit of advice without, breaking the space-time continuum. What advice are you going to give yourself and why?
So looking back, it's sort of the advice. So my son is now in undergrad and my daughter's starting law school. I guess they're drinking the Kool-Aid and want to be trial lawyers because they saw how much, I guess, I loved it. And they want to do it. And my son is gung-ho about it, and my daughter is as well. So what I would tell them, or what I would tell myself, is get some trial experience, get in there and take some beatings, even if it means losing. It's okay. Um, you only get better, and every time you get in that courtroom, you're going to get better. Continue to learn, continue to get better, and don't get scared of. I mean, look, if you don't want to be a trial lawyer, then obviously this message isn't for you. But you can still take it and use it for something else, right? Whatever it is you want to do, I would look at, and I put your tunnel vision on. Like my trainer always says, focus. You know how racehorses have their blinders on and they can't look and get distracted. So focus on your mission, look straight ahead, and don't look at just a 1 year goal or a 2 year goal. Have the 5 year, 10 year, 15 year goal. Where do you want to be? How do you see yourself 15 years from now? And then start planning out what you're going to do. So every day, are you moving the needle forward, or is it not moving, or is it moving backwards? So going back, I would look at tell my younger self, hey, think 15 years out. What do you want to do in 15 years? Where do you want to live? How do you want to live? Who do you want to be with? What kind of, if you're doing law, what kind of law firm do you want? Or if you're doing any type of, what do you see yourself doing? And then work backwards and start planning your future. Because if you don't have a plan for the future, someone else will have a plan for you, right? So you need to have a plan. And I would tell young Saghi, get in there, try cases, continue to get better, have your plan. Where do you want to get to? So I always had a plan. I said, I'm going to be board certified. I'm going to try enough cases to get board certified. After I get board certified, I'm going to get the big cases. How do I get the big cases? This is what I saw myself. I had a vision in my mind where I'm going to be, how I'm going to get there. And, I've achieved everything I wanted and many more. Just because it just happened that way. And I guess it's really what I thought was going to happen happened. So you really want to be a visionary, look into the future. That's what I would tell my younger self. Don't just look at a 1 year plan or 2 year plan. Really look at 5, 10 years, because a lot is possible in 5 years. You would be surprised how much you can get done in 5 years. It's a lot of time, and it's not 5 weeks. Don't look for the quick fix. Look long term. So that would be my major advice to anyone in any field, really. Think big, think long term, and never give up. And then
That
your
just sounded
other
right.
question, go ahead. Your
That
your other
just sounded right. Go ahead.
yeah. Your other question is, if I can change, like um take that magic pen and change one thing. That's a great argument, by the way, for closing argument, except in Florida, they took it away. I think there's a case where the attorney said if they could just wave that magic wand and bring back little Johnny, the parents would do it, but they can't. And the appellate court said, we can't make that argument anymore. So, but professionally, if I can change that pen and, you know, take another shot at something or change the law. I think one law that I think is really unfair in Florida compared to other states, there's two of them. They used to put caps on certain types of damages where people would get hurt and there would be a cap on it and they can't recover more than that cap, like a ceiling, a certain amount. There's actually a case, I think, in Idaho or Iowa, I can't remember the state, where there was a big med mal reform they were trying to do and put caps on medical malpractice. And the one person who was leading the charge, who was the main lobbyist for this, was helped get the caps in place in his state. And then lo and behold, karma comes back, right? Who becomes a victim of medical malpractice? The same lobbyist who helped put caps on medical malpractice. So now this lobbyist is fighting to undo the caps. So one thing is, thankfully we don't have too many caps. We have some bad laws in the state that are not favorable to people or the average day Joe or Jane. They're favorable to insurance companies. And I think there is one law that if I can go back and get it fixed, I would. So a lot of times people come to our office in, we'll say, the medical malpractice setting, where in Florida, again, every state is different. If in a medical malpractice setting, a doctor or a medical professional commits malpractice and you are not married, or you don't have children under the age of 25. The doctor gets away scot-free. The medical facility gets away scot-free. There's no lawsuit that you can bring against them because the way the Florida medical malpractice statute works is that if you don't have a spouse or survivors under the age of 25, so it goes across spouse and survivors under the age of 25, you can't recover. So let's say someone is, pick an age, 45, and their child is 26 years old. They had him at 19 years old, right? Their child is 26 years old and they don't have a spouse, and there's some gross act of negligence committed on the medical malpractice negligence, and they die. The hospital gets away scot-free. The doctor gets away scot-free. There is no lawsuit that can be brought. Now, people don't know this. And unfortunately, the only time they know it is after something horrific happens to their family. So I wish that law was changed because it would get, doctors, hospitals to act more reasonably. And again, this isn't a call out to say all doctors are bad. They're not. There's some amazing doctors out there who save people's lives and do amazing work. And there's amazing hospitals that do great work. This isn't a call out on everyone. This is a call out on the bad ones, right? Because there are bad ones, or the ones that make mistakes that put people's lives and change people's lives. So that's,
What was it?
if I
I
had
think
a
it was
pen.
Johns Hopkins, I think it was, said that medical malpractice is potentially like the third leading cause of death in the country. I think it was a Johns Hopkins study or something, and they said the sheer number of deaths from medical malpractice, let alone non-deaths that are life impacting, is just staggering. So the fact that there's so many laws on the books, I think that's a wonderful use of the magic pen.
Yes, yes, yes. That would be a law that would really be beneficial to a lot of families that have come to us in the past. And we've tried in terms of the trial lawyers, the Florida Justice Association has tried to change that, but the insurance lobby group is way too strong, has so much money that it's hard to make any changes. In fact, not the last legislative session, but the one in 2023, there were sweeping reforms that really just helped insurance companies. And the way they pitch it and massage it and message it it sounds like it's helping the average person, but it's not. It really does. All it is just save insurance companies more money and put people in a really precarious position where they're not, if something ever happens to them, just like that guy from Idaho or Iowa, the lobbyist, they're in a bad situation or in a bind because of insurance companies got the money and the power to push the laws the way they want to go. They're actually trying to do the same thing they did in Florida, now in Georgia. Unfair to the average person, for the big insurance company representatives, yeah, it's great for them. They get to put more money in their pocket. But for you and I, Justin, unfair. And for everyone else, unfair.
Absolutely. Well, Sagi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. It's actually a much longer podcast than I was expecting, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I think you tell wonderful stories. You speak very well. You clearly know what you're talking about. And I really enjoyed it. I do like to let my guest have the final word. Is there any other parting words of wisdom you'd like to leave our guests with, our listeners with, or anything like that?
Yeah, never settle for less. That's kind of our company motto. Don't just take the first offer. Don't take their last offer. Keep fighting, and work hard, and eventually you're going to win. So I appreciate, Kevin, humbled that you asked me to be on your podcast, and thank you for making it interesting and asking some amazing questions, and hopefully someone gets something out of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again for taking the time to talk with me. This has been, as always, The Attorney Post. I am your host, Justin West. I have been talking with Sagi Shaked of Sheked Law down in Florida. As always, though this podcast does talk about a whole host of legal issues, this podcast does not itself constitute legal advice. If you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Obviously, if you live in Florida and you are injured, I think that Saghi would be a wonderful resource for you. And again, I would recommend him confidently, and you can find all of his information below. That's shakedlaw.com. Link, phone number, everything else down in the description below. As far as the podcast goes, if you're watching this on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share, or review, a rating on any of the podcast repositories that are out there. But the number one thing you can do to help us grow this podcast and help other people is if you know somebody who has been injured and could use this information, share the podcast with them. Help them get informed because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you.